Hello and welcome to Ruck on, the rugby show. I'm Chris Stafford.
And I'm Kim Donaldson.
And I'm so glad you're here, Kim, because what do I know about rugby?
I think you know more than you give yourself credit for, Chris. You seem pretty on top of it.
I love it. Let's put it that way. And I wish we had had the opportunity to play it when I was a young woman, because I really do enjoy it. And I think you and I have talked about, the World Cup last year and how exciting that was when you and Maria Sampson were doing Ruck on last year and leading up to the World Cup and all of that excitement, and then being able to watch it online. And then when we got to the final, and I have to say, even though I was made in England, I was rooting for the Kiwi girls. I mean, they were absolutely awesome. And it was just and I keep playing that. I keep playing that on YouTube, it was just awesome.
Well, yeah, number one, like you said, the accessibility. One, you could watch it. You weren't there and you could watch it easily. And number two, just the caliber of play. And it's hard not to cheer for a team like New Zealand just because of the level of play, their professionalism, and just what they managed to pull out under pressure. It's phenomenal.
It was so exciting, that game, the power play, and the way they just lifted their game in the second half was awesome.
Yeah, they never they're never relent. They're always wanting more, no matter what position they're in.
Kendra Coxhead, one of the Kiwi girls, she's been a guest on our New Zealand show a couple of times now, and I was texting with her not long ago, actually, before she came back on the show at the end of last year. And that was the first chance I got to tell her what how much I enjoyed watching her play, because I said, you remind me of my terrier, because she's relentless like a terrier going after a rabbit. They never give up, right?
Yeah.
That's like Kendra and all of those girls. It was just super to watch. It really was.
Yeah, phenomenal. And obviously there's been more happening since then.
A lot has been happening, and we got a lot on the show this week, and I'm thrilled that you're back, Kim, and we should remind everybody that you were a hooker for the Canadian team, and now you're retired, doing a bit of coaching up there in Victoria, BC. Still got your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the sport.
I tried to. As I just mentioned to Chris offline, I kind of had my head buried in the sand over the holiday season. When I pulled it out, I was kind of surprised and said, "Oh wow, yeah, there's a whole world of rugby that's going on. I need to get back on top of things."
Well, you have, because you've got a great lineup for us on this episode of Ruck On. And so let's get started, because caught my attention this week. I follow the news as closely as I can for women in sport, all sports, and when I saw this news coming out of Australia, I was like, yay, why don't we move to Australia? This is great news for rugby.
Australia has some very exciting news this week. Rugby Australia announced that they had a new collective agreement to guarantee women's and men's sevens as well as Super Rugby starters the same base pay. So that means that sevens players for both men and women will be paid a living salary. The entry-level salary is $44,500, as well as Super Rugby starters. And Australia actually kicked off a new women's Super Rugby league that will be starting this year in March. So there are 5 teams. And so just really speaking to their commitment to professionalizing women's sport and women's rugby specifically, Rugby Australia has a new CEO as of the end of 2017, Raylene Castle. So yeah, it was really important for her to get this bargaining agreement underway, just to follow suit with other sports. So Australia women already have similar collective agreements for cricket as well as AFL, and also have professional soccer and netball for women. So Australia, a lot of really exciting things happening.
Very exciting and good for them. They really led the way, with cricket and with netball and in AFL. And, I think they're finally realizing the value of women's sports now and the need to get that sponsorship, get professional contracts and get the media coverage. And, of course, the cricketing girls, they won the Ashes that took place just at the end of last year. It was really meaningful to them to win back the Ashes, and I think it's just very encouraging because it's having an effect in that sport and beyond that sport, Kim. That's the great thing about when a country steps up and does something like this, recognizes women. It's hard for the other nations, and especially the leading nations in the sport, to ignore that. And we're going to talk about England now because they got to the final of the World Cup, of course, but got beaten by the Kiwis. And there's been a little bit of a scrummage, I would have to say, amongst their ranks, hasn't there?
Yeah, so England has a few interesting things going on. I mean, the English program is probably the most in-depth program, I'd say, in the world. So even on their national side, they have several layers to their team. They have their starters, but then also have probably 3 versions of who their starters can be, and A teams and B teams and specialty teams. And they have so much high-level rugby for such a small place. So similar to Australia, they've actually just started professionalizing their top level for their women's league. And so that started this past fall. And so what they're actually doing is looking at their next club level, the women's level 2 league. And so right now, just as part of that commitment to strengthen the women's game, they're doing a review, which will conclude in March, and just seeing how they can continue to support and facilitate the growth of the women's game. So as I said, that club season got away in the fall, and right now the Saracens sit at the top of it. They'll be taking a bit of a break for Six Nations, obviously. But yeah, England is just, for me, a more known leader in terms of growing the game, and so nice to see that other nations like Australia have that similar commitment.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned the Six Nations there, Kim. One of my favourite, on the men's game and the women's game, is the Six Nations, of course. As a European, it's pretty much the highlight of the winter seasons. The Six Nation comes round, and you've got some of the best sport in the world right there. Notwithstanding, of course, those that are not participating, but it is a much loved series there. And do you guys watch that, as Canadians? Does that give you like a marker of, where each teams are? I know you guys have talked about it on this show before, but it is a good indicator. It's a good barometer, I guess, for you to see how that's playing out. Yeah,
it really is. I'd say the only kind of minor difference is Six Nations also coincides with the Sevens circuit. So sometimes those teams will be lacking a handful of players that might be away with their Seven side. But I think maybe because in terms of international rugby in North America, we kind of have a bit of a break. In BC, we have our own club leagues, and the rest of the country, people are training. But yeah, like for us to stay involved in the game, we want to know what other teams are doing, and Six Nations is always so exciting every year. It's not a sure win who's going to be in the top, and there's some really interesting performances and upsets, and yeah, it's always a really exciting tournament.
And it gets underway on February the 2nd, right? So
that's right. So Wales will host Scotland for the first game, and that will be. Sorry, I thought I had written down where they played.
Do they play in Cardiff if they're hosting Scotland?
Could be in Cardiff. I'm not entirely sure, Chris.
Okay. And so they're going to host Scotland. Well, that'll be an interesting kickoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Wales maybe didn't have the performance that they wanted through the World Cup, but in their games leading up to the World Cup, showed a bit more moxie and some good performances against Japan. So that program has been growing, and I have some confidence in Wales, and I know has a spot in your heart, Chris. So I'm excited to see how Wales fares. And I know Scotland started to recruit some crossover athletes. They have a new athlete who's crossed over from skiing, which is interesting. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what those two teams do with that first match. Also for Six Nations, there will be a game held in Bastia, Corsica, when Italy takes on France. That's a little later in February. And the other cool thing is, again, we mentioned accessibility. And so Six Nations, trying to promote the sport, has guaranteed that each game will be made available either on TV or streamed on the Six Nations website and the rugby union specifically. And then this is a cool thing. The BBC will host a Monday night roundup of the previous weekend's matches. So again, just continuing to promote the sport for people who may not be maybe known to women's rugby, really pushing it forward to get the word out there, to get the good word out there. Chris?
Well, that's great. So it means we can watch it over here in North America, does it?
Yeah, that's right. So we can follow play-by-play what's happening.
Oh, fabulous. So how do we do that then? Where do we go? Is there a website we should know about?
Yeah, so Six Nations website, you should be able to see what's going on there. Just reading through the specifics, doesn't seem like they have a full broadcast lineup, but I will keep you posted. So it'll either be through, I know I've watched games via YouTube through that union's YouTube channel, and I've also watched it on the World Rugby website. So those are a couple of places to check out.
Okay, that's really good to know. And if you have any more information on that, Kim, do you want to tag us on social media and we'll share that for our listeners? Because I certainly want to be keeping up to speed as to where we can watch that. And we will share that and promote it on the other shows too. So if you have any more information, just go ahead and tag us at WiSP Sports.
No problem.
And you had mentioned how Wales has a special place in my heart. It actually still is, because I spent a lot of my childhood down there riding ponies on the Welsh mountains. And I absolutely love it down there. It's South Wales particularly. And so they've always been, my favourite rugby team on the men's and women's side. I've always kind of championed them. Go ahead.
Rugby is really growing as well in Wales. So I think in South Wales it's been a little bit more popular, but it seems like in recent years the women's game specifically has grown through Northern Wales as well. And so it seems like it's a very, very much a growing sport for women, which is exciting to see.
It's great, but just across the Irish Sea there, their neighbours over in Ireland, my goodness, has that been stirring up a storm since the World Cup? I really feel for those Irish girls. We've been covering that story a little bit elsewhere about the Irish rugby girls, because they've had a rough time since the World Cup, haven't they? They lost a coach, and their governing body even just abandoned them, right, Kim? I mean, it was just awful.
Yeah, I guess I'm disappointed and not surprised, Chris. I feel like I've been through and seen the same kind of thing firsthand here in Canada. So the build up towards the World Cup, towards Ireland hosting the World Cup, I thought was fabulous. There was good media promotion. It seemed like the country as well as the union was really on board. They didn't have the performance that they wanted, unfortunately, but also it's an amateur team. And that just means that all the women who are playing also, for the most part, have full-time jobs. So they're putting in as much commitment as they can. And, like so many rugby players and so many athletes, they do it for the love of the game and for the love of their teammates. And they put in as much as they can, but you can only do so much with what you have. Since the World Cup, the head coach, Tom Tierney, he stepped down. And there was a bit of a controversy around the posting that came up for the head coach position. It was posted as a part-time position, and some players had a hard time with that. Specifically, center Jenny Murphy was very outspoken and talked about what a travesty it was, and I think was maybe a contributing factor to her stepping away from the sport for a year. She's taking a sabbatical year, and I think she's dabbling in some other things like boxing, but just didn't feel like the union was giving the support that she felt that she and the other athletes deserved. So yeah, they've had a bit of a hard time. So for now, anyways, the interim coaches are Adam Griggs with Mike Ross, and Jeff Carter's been brought on board just recently, I believe, to help coach the forwards. It seems like they've also had a lot of retirements. So Sophie Speck played for Ireland. She locked for them for the past 5 years, had an incredible impact over those years, and she just recently retired at the end of 2017. And it seems like they've got several new caps on their roster. I think they have 9 new caps for Six Nations. So as we said before already, Six Nations is an exciting tournament, and I think an opportunity for some of those younger players to get in as well. And just kind of so teams can start to figure out what their playing styles are like, and athletes can start to mesh and gel together. So, yeah, that's what's up with Ireland. I wish them the best, and it just seems like a bit of a transition time for them right now.
Yeah, and following that story about how they were only offered a part-time because they were amateurs, but it also had an effect on some of the players saying, okay, if you don't believe in us, you don't deserve our loyalty, and they couldn't afford, to be paying their way to games. I'm sure you've heard this elsewhere, how players just have to fork out of their own pocket, and they're not. It's not like they're playing at club level; they're playing international level, and it's still costing them.
Yeah, and it's a system that I know very well. Unfortunately, that was the system for the duration of my career. And then right after my retirement, we had some alumni who did some incredible fundraising and helped us step away from the pay-to-play model. But that's a very recent thing in Canada. And just Ireland being surrounded by so many strong rugby nations, it's just too bad that a strong union like the Irish Rugby Union can't get on board to help them out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully their luck changes, as we get into the Six Nations and the Sevens as well, of course. And we talked about the Six Nations getting underway in just a few weeks at the beginning of February, but before then, that Scotland has a friendly to play. Yeah,
so Scotland is hosting Spain in Glasgow at Scotstoun Stadium. So that's January 21st. That's next weekend, I think. Hey, so yeah, that'll be kind of the first of international women's 15s rugby for 2018, which will be exciting. I don't have any information on whether that will be aired or not, but I'll keep my eye on it and let you know. And then after that, we'll be into Six Nations, and after that, we'll be into the spring and summer events. So for now, there's Six Nations to watch. Sevens rugby will be starting soon as well. So the HSBC Sevens, they had their first stop Dubai in November, and Australia took that title home, and so the next one will be in Sydney, and that's at the end of January, I believe January 26th to 28th.
And it's become very popular. We've seen the short format in other sports as well for the purposes of attracting a broader audience, to be, TV friendly, media friendly, and so on. So, we've got this long and short format for so many different sports. How do you feel about the short format, Kim? Is that a game that you enjoy as much as the 15s?
Enjoy differently. Enjoy as a spectator. I think I dabbled in it maybe as a club player, but given my position, it was never really my forte, Chris. I do love watching Sevens because it is so exciting. It's a bit of a different skill set, the use of space, the longer passes, a different type of contact, I guess. It is a really exciting game to watch, and I think cool to bring in spectators who maybe are unfamiliar with rugby, and I know watching 15s can just be a pile of confusion, so at least Sevens has those fun bursts and fun highlights. I was a little bit worried just with the takeoff of Sevens that 15s would start to be cast aside. Just I know here in Canada that because Sevens is an Olympic sport, a lot of funding and resources, even outside of the Olympic level, are starting to be tailored towards Sevens, because that's where athletes will have, let's say, use the word success. That's they'll be able to make it the furthest, and it's cool to be an Olympian, and kids want to do that. It is really nice to see, though. Again, I'm going to jump back to Australia and how proud of Australia I am that they're keeping the 15s game going. And so not just at the international level, but with the development with their Super W teams as well. In England, putting the resources into their premier sides. So it is nice to see that 15s does have a place in people's hearts and in their pockets still. So just a different sport. And if we can continue to attract more people to the game, then that's great.
It's one way of doing it, absolutely. And I know finally you've got a story about women's wheelchair rugby, which is great to have. And I'm glad you brought this to our attention, because the one thing that's noticeable, and we're seeing a lot more equality amongst sports, it's starting to happen more, but it's not in wheelchair rugby, is it? Because women are not in the Paralympics.
That's right. So I actually had the luxury of going to the Men's Paralympic Rugby World Cup a few years ago that was held in Vancouver. And I hadn't really heard about a women's side. And so when I saw this story, I got really excited. So this was held in Paris, France, the 4th Women's Wheelchair Rugby Cup. And so I think really true to a sport that I find just kind of makes it happen, and players come because they love the game. So in Paris, they had 30 athletes show up, and they split them into 6 teams based on their nationalities and geographical areas. And they had, I think, 14 countries represented in the end from across Europe, the Americas, Asia, and had a really successful tournament. And the athletes were wanting more and wanting to know when the next tournament's going to happen. And I think they also used it as a platform to develop referees as well. And so had an all-female tournament to develop the sport for players, referees, administrative staff, everybody. So yeah, pretty exciting to see, and hopefully with this growth, it might be something that ends up in the Paralympic circuit as well.
Fantastic. Well, what a lot of news you've got for us this time. This is really fabulous. Thank you so much, Kim. It's always good to catch up with you, and tell us what you're doing before you go. Are you coaching now, or do you get to play at all during the winter?
Boots are still firmly planted on the shelf, Chris. No desire to put them on now. Yeah,
really?
No. Yeah, that's how it is. But I do really enjoy coaching. So as I've spoken about before on the show, in the fall, I was working with the University of Victoria and working with their university season, which wrapped up towards the end of October. And so for me, the second half of the rugby season in BC, I'm devoting to the Castaway Wanderers, CW. It's a local club based out of Victoria. So I'll be working with them on a weekly basis, and our games get started in a couple of weeks. And so we just got back to the pitch this week, and we're ready to roll.
Fantastic. Now, I know you keep fit for any occasion, don't you? I mean, you do gym. You still, just to keep your level of fitness up, though. I mean, just because you're not playing rugby, you're still an athlete, right?
It's true. Also, my career for several years was training other people. And so I'm very comfortable in a gym. It's a place where I can relax and unwind. Moving back to the West Coast, it's also nice because I have there's an ocean about 8 minutes away. So I enjoy running along the water. There's mountains to climb. There's all sorts of things to do here. So yes, staying active and staying fit is very much a part of my life. And I don't think I'll let that part go anytime soon.
That's good to hear, Kim. Well, thanks for coming to the show again. And I know you were going to be circling back in a month's time. You'll come back with more news. Maybe we'll find a guest to join us as well. Could be, Chris. Can't wait. Excellent. All right. Well, in the meanwhile, don't forget to check us out at wispsports.com. We've got over 30 shows now, 750 episodes, and we already have a global audience of 1.5 million for WiSP Sports Radio. So there's something for everybody here, and I hope you'll tune in, download us on any podcast player, and visit us online. You can also get the full transcripts of these shows at wispsports.com, and we are out on social media at wispsports. And Kim, remind us of your Twitter handle. Kimmy Donaldson. Kimmy Donaldson is as easy as that. It's Kimmie, right? That sounds right, Chris. Okay, all right. Kimmy Donaldson on Twitter, and if you've got any updates, Kim, you'll tag us on social media so we can share with everybody, right, in the world of rugby. About those game times. Fantastic. All right. Well, we'll be back in a month's time with more from Ruck on. Until then, thanks for listening. Goodbye for now.